Hello and welcome to another exciting golfing video. So as a quick backstory, at the beginning of this summer we started off with about 5 different golf clubs. However, by the end of the summer, one thing led to another and now we have 62 golf clubs we picked up at various antique stores, garage sales, and bargain bins. So the big takeaway from this video is going to be looking at which golf clubs work well and which ones aren't worth the time or money. Since we've tested almost every golf club here at the range, we have a good idea of how they work and if they work well. We'll start off today by having a look at these drivers. The drivers are probably the worst old golf club that causes the most amount of problems. So if there's any golf club you should be buying new, it's probably the drivers, as the new drivers are a big step up. The big problem is the tiny surface area. Since these drivers are about half the size of the new ones, so they are very hard to hit. The shafts are heavy, so you won't be swinging as fast. And the heads are heavy too, especially on the wood ones, so you won't be hitting them as hard. You'll be moving slower. They're much harder to hit. And they're very easy to hit wrong, so you can blast a ball 50 yards in the wrong direction. No problem whatsoever. They do cause a lot of problems. The new drivers are far, far superior than the old ones, so you really want to watch out when you're buying a driver. All these ones here, the drivers we have, we got 6 drivers and almost none of them work well. It's pretty tough. Now we'll move on to the woods, which can be a bit nicer, but they still are quite problematic. They're about 2/3 the size of modern woods, so you have to watch out for that as well. They are quite small. The wooden woods from the 1970s and stuff, they're usable technically, but some of them are pretty nasty. You also gotta watch out from the grips. So wood's also a problem, but you can get away with some of the metal woods. They're not too bad. Like this Legend right here from Dynatour, it works okay, but it's definitely not as good as the new ones, but it can be workable, unlike the old drivers, which can be pretty much useless. Here's an example of what a 1960s McGregor looks like. This one had to be re-gripped, and we tried to use it and it was extremely difficult to use. The ball went 30 yards to where you were aiming. Just balls going all over the place. It was not good. So I definitely wouldn't recommend these woods from the 60s. They are tough to use. Now we'll move on to some of the irons. The irons, you can get decent ones that are old, but there are some that really don't work out. This is an example of one that doesn't work well. It's a Spalding tournament model from the 1960s. Had to be re-gripped because the grip was rotted out, but we could re-grip it. Here we have a Magnum from Waterford. Another one, it's called a Blade. It just does not work well. The sweet spot on this bad boy is about the size of a BB pellet. It's extremely hard to hit. You can hit this wrong, no problem whatsoever, very easy. This is also a muscleback design, and this Spalding, another tough golf club with a very small sweet spot. What you want to be looking for is these cavity irons right here. This one has a small cavity, it's from the 1970s, but it can still do a good job. The sweet spot's bigger, so it's a lot easier to hit. Probably the sweet spot is more than 2 to 3 times larger than the musclebacks and blades, so it does a decent job even though it's old. It costs about $1 or $2, so they are very cheap. Here we have a better cavity. This is the type of cavity you want to look for, but they do cost a bit more money. But if you can find them cheap, buy them right away, since these are the money clubs right here, if you know what I mean. We'll also show you guys an example of a tough grip right here. This is one from the 1950s, a Spalding blade. And that's what the grip looks like. It is pretty horrendous. It's very hard to re-grip. Since the shaft size is not standardized, the grip is taped on there pretty good. It's going to be hard to remove. This is a club we would not be using. We just picked it up on the side it was being thrown out, so this is pretty much a garbage club unless you want to collect it. Now we'll move on to some of the fun stuff. So this right here is an iron, about a 3-iron from the 1920s or 1930s, one of those two. It's a 3-iron, but it's about a 5-iron in modern day, since the old golf clubs add 2 to the iron number, so this is about a 5-iron. The problem with these is the grips. You can see the grip there. It's pretty horrendous. It's going to hurt your hands in cold weather, so only use these in warm weather because they're Your hands are gonna be hurting and stinging by the time you're done, so really not worth it. They do also have either a flat back, which is also pretty hard to hit. When you whack these, it's gonna sound like a whip, which can be fun, but well, they're just not ideal. They hurt your hands, easy to miss hit. So they got weird designs in the front that also mess up how the ball goes. It's just not good to use, but they can be fun. These old ones from the 20s, 30s, and 40s are mostly for fun rather than being actually usable. Here we have what looks like a 4-iron. This is a Mashi, I believe. Well, this is a 5-iron, sorry. This is the mid-irons we're moving on to here. It is rusty, but you can clean up. You can still use it. The heads are very heavy on these, so it is going to be hard to swing, but they can still be usable. These are more mid-irons here. Then we'll move on to a 7-iron. This is an example of a golf or a replica from the 1940s. It's got a bad face pattern, which makes it harder to hit. This muscle back design that kind of bulges out. Really not ideal as well. So this is another tough golf club to use. We got a couple of old ones right here. And of course a First Hickory club. This one's a Mashi, which is about a 6-iron, we believe. These can be fun to use, but you also have to watch out for these Hickory clubs, since once again the grips are nasty. There's some screws in this one which can make it hard to hit, and the shaft can have some cracks. This one appears to be in good condition, so you really want to be careful of the shafts on these old Hickory clubs. We'll keep moving along up to the 9-irons here. So here we have looks like some kind of autograph golf club. This one's from the 40s. As you can see, it has a metal shaft, so ones from the 40s and late 30s do have metal shafts. The wood was taken out of them. Grip's a bit nicer, but this one's also rock hard, so you gotta watch out for those grips. And now we'll move on to the pitching wedges. So these ones, there's a lot of these out there. They're also very cheap. You can get a decent one from the 80s. This is a Blade, not a nice one, unfortunately. But there are still a lot of cavity blades out there. This one was about $2. It has a decent enough grip on it, so be sure to spend a bit of money on these pitching wedges, as they can still be good and cheap at the same time. And we have a sand wedge here. These ones are also pretty cheap normally because people don't like sand wedges, so you can use it to replace your pitching wedge, and you have a very nice pitching wedge even if it doesn't go as far. And it can still be accurate. This one was about $2. That's in almost perfect condition, so it's a good golf club to use if you can find it. Now I'll move on to the putters. The putters, surprisingly enough, do make a bit of a difference. So here we have the old Blade putters. These ones can cause quite a bit of problems. This one's from the 20s, the other one's from the 1950s. If you look at the head, it's actually angled a bit, as back then the greens were in good condition, so it actually pops the ball up a bit, and there's no center of gravity on these, so it's actually possible to blade the ball and mishit it very easily. So you have to watch out for these putters. They can be a lot of problem. I would not recommend using these types. They're mostly for collection or just as a conversation piece, unless they are kind of cool with how they look. But that's about it. Now I'll move on to these bullseye putters over here. These ones are from the 1940s to 1980s. Once again, these ones are flat, so it's easier to hit the ball, but the center of gravity isn't good. They're very heavy, so I wouldn't recommend these ones. I mean, you can find it for $1 or $2 at your local thrift store, which can be decent, but it's probably not worth it for how much it's going to impact your putting game. Now I'll move on to the nice putters over here. These ones are made, or these ping type putters are made from the 1960s to modern day. They do have some aiming lines on them. They're totally flat. They have a long face, and they do have a much better center of gravity, so it's much easier to hit these things properly rather than those nasty bullseye putters. So these are the ones you want to look for. This putter right here, it's done us very well. It costs about $2, so you may as well pick it up if you can find it. So always look for these ping type putters and ditch those bullseyes whenever possible. But if you don't have the money, or all you can find, the bullseyes will do, but keep in mind they are quite problematic. So thanks for watching, and we do have a quick word on golf balls here. So these right here, these weird holes, well, if you want to have a look, All these golf clubs, all these golf balls here are from the 1960s. These ones can be quite problematic since they're filled with elastic bands. Once the elastic bands get old, they harden up and they really mess up the golf ball. You lose about 20 yards on your driver's swing if you use these, so stick these in a box as a collectible item. Don't actually use these because they're really gonna mess up your golf game if you try to use these things. These are the decent golf balls. Not good, not bad. That's like Pro Flight XLs, which will do the job, but they're not good. And here we have the nice ones here. All nice and shiny. Got a couple Pro V1s back there. You can usually find in the bush. You don't have to spend a huge amount on golf balls. You can just go around the course and pick up decent golf balls all the time. Here we have a Srixon. Does a good enough job. Not the best, but it's good enough for those pitch and putts and par 3s and 4s. So, to sum it up, drivers and woods are very problematic once they're old. Irons, they'll do a good enough job as long as you can get a cavity. The blades and muscle backs are pretty brutal to try to hit. Pitching wedges normally doesn't matter too much. Putters doesn't matter too much. But keep an eye out for the ping type putters. And don't go for the bullseyes if possible. And only use these blade putters as a last resort, or just showing off how good you are at putting. Say, wow, I can hit this crappy blade putter from the 1920s, I'm just that good at putting. Don't use it if you're playing the game seriously though, because it's going to cause quite a bit of problems. So thanks for watching, and feel free to leave a comment on which golf club you think is the best.